Welcome to Starved Rock State Park. My name is Lisa Sons, and I am the Natural Resource Coordinator for Starved Rock and Matheson State Parks under the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. Thank you for abiding by the state's COVID-19 guidelines by keeping your masks on during the duration of our program. If you do need to use the restroom, they are located to your right through those sliding glass doors. Please feel free to leave the program at any time if you have to do so. Also note that water fountains are closed off due to COVID. If you need a drink of water, there are vending machines available across from the restrooms. Our program today is going to be a short 20 to 30 minute tour of the Visitor Center's exhibit hall. We are going to travel back in time 10,000 years to visit some of our previous human inhabitants of the Starved Rock area. What did they eat? How did they live? What types of tools or weapons did they use to survive? Please follow me as we explore this further. As you walk through the trails at Starved Rock, you're going to notice the lush vegetation around you in the woodlands and prairies. You might even hear the crunch of the sandstone underneath your feet as you traverse our many trails. Maybe take in the view of the sprawling Illinois River from our many overlooks. But what isn't always evident is the rich history of an area. Archaeologists throughout the 20th century have uncovered the rich history of the Starved Rock area. Let's travel back 10,000 years to begin. I want you to take a moment and imagine yourself standing on one of those sandstone bluffs. You are covered from head to toe in thick animal furs because of the climate. This is during the end of the last glacial period, the Wisconsin era. During this time, an ice mass had formed a sheet as far south as present-day Bloomington, Illinois. You are trekking through deep snow and ice on the hunt for woolly mammoths, as pictured here. Your arsenal are items you have built yourself from the materials available. A spear in one hand, shaped from a limb from a tree. At the end, a clovis point you chipped from rock you found and attached with ligament from animals that you had hunted, such as the mammoth. We've all used hand sanitizer, so it's safe to pass this around to view. This clovis point was actually found in Illinois, and it's on loan from the Illinois State Museum. Other items in your arsenal are displayed here in this display box. You would have used animal bone, antlers, for tools, rocks, and wood. Clothing, again, was from animal skins and furs. The men from the Paleo-Indian period were the hunters. The Paleo-Indian women and children were the gatherers. They were also gathering that meat to cook the food and making clothing from the hide and the fur pelts. During the Paleo-Indian period, they were living in rock shelters. Here at Starved Rock, we call those rock shelters alcoves. Alcoves are indentations in the sandstone canyon walls. This was their shelter. As we move forward in time, we're going to come around this side here and view the Chronicle of the Past exhibit. We move forward to 5,000 years ago. This brings us to the Archaic period. You're standing on that same sandstone bluff, but the climate is much warmer. The glaciers are gone. Instead of standing in snow and ice, you're now standing in grass, grasses, plants. You have an alpine forest around you of firs, spruces, and pines with a lowland canopy of oak and hickory trees. You're now draped in a tunic of elk skin. Your feet are covered in that same elk skin. You're carrying a basket. Because not only as an archaic Indian are you a hunter, but you're now a gatherer. You're gathering nuts such as acorns, walnuts, hickory. You're also gathering roots, tubers from various plants you found in the woodlands. You're taking that basket of what you gathered back to your larger family group, still living in those alcoves, those rock shelters. The men are the hunters. The women and children are the gatherers. During the Archaic period, the spear has changed over. Your arsenal has now evolved to the use of an atlatl. This is a device with a smaller spear inserted that you can fling further distances with better accuracy. Now you'll notice from our time scale, we're moving forward again to the woodland period. This is just 1,000 years ago. Here at Starved Rock, archaeologists in the 20th century found evidence of the woodland period just outside of French Canyon. So if you hike today at the park to French Canyon, think about that when you're entering. Think off to the right in the woodland area. That once was a woodland village. 1,000 years ago, you're still hunters and gatherers. You are now part of larger extended family groups along the Mississippi River Valley and into the Illinois River Valley. These larger extended family groups are now trading amongst one another, trading and communicating. This is the beginning of tribes, beginning of culture, beginning of a belief system, beginning of communication and language. During this time, hunters and gatherers are also becoming farmers because of trade. This is where we see maize or corn being introduced to this area. Here at Starved Rock, archaeologists found evidence that our large island in the middle of the river, Plum Island, was once used as farmland for that same maize, squash, and melon. During the woodland period, women and children were the gatherers, men were the hunters, and at this time also warriors. There were some territorial disputes, mainly over hunting grounds or resources. They traveled with the resources. Now we're moving forward again to just 500 years into our past during the Mississippian period. The Mississippian period was evident with large-scale human inhabitation along the Mississippi River Valley and then spreading more into the Illinois River Valley, including what we know of as the Starved Rock area. Most of the archaeological excavations done in the 20th century show evidence of the Mississippian period here at Starved Rock, specifically across the river at a site called the Zimmerman site. This was once the grand village of the Kaskaskia, pictured here in this mural and exhibit. Men were still the hunters and warriors. As pictured here in this mannequin, they were wearing deerskin loincloths. Winter, they would wear heavier animal furs, bison, elk, bear. The women would wear skirts or loincloths of that same deerskin or tunics over their head. The men were the hunters and warriors. The women were the cooks, the farmers. They managed Plum Island and the squash, the melons, and the maize planted there. They were also the gatherers, the nuts and the berries, and they were the wigwam engineers. A wigwam is pictured here. They would make the wigwams from gathering reeds from the local wetlands, drying them in the sun, and then weaving them into mats. Think of your table runners or your placemats at home. These served as shingles that they threw over young trees that formed the arches inside. A wigwam would suit an immediate family, to an extended family. The larger wigwams, called longhouses, were for meetings, and they could hold 40 or more people at once. At this time, I'd like you to take a moment to each come up and view the inside of the wigwam. I want you to think of yourself as a member of the Kaskaskia tribe. Think of yourself living inside the wigwam. Maybe you just caught a fish from the Illinois River, and you're cooking it over that central fire that also served as warmth and light for your home. You're a member of the Kaskaskia village. You just viewed your wigwam or your home. As a member of the village, if you were a man, again, you were a hunter. You've now changed from using the atlatl to the bow and arrow. Bow and arrow came about during the woodland period and into the Mississippian period. Pass that around. Bow and arrow allows you to hunt smaller game with better accuracy. So they're adding to their diet duck, geese, turkey, beaver, not to mention deer. They're also adding to what they're gathering, the berries, other types of plants that are now coming into the area that they're noticing wildlife utilizing. So, hey, let's try it. I would not have wanted to be the person that tried poison ivy, though. That wouldn't have been good. Also, they're utilizing what they're growing on the island. This is still a summer village. They're still traveling between summer and winter land. They're still traveling after food, after the resources. Pictured here in the mural, and within the mannequins, you'll see the chief of the Kaskaskia people. He's holding a calumet, or a peace pipe. He is greeting the first Europeans that they saw along the river. Can you imagine yourself as a member of the tribe seeing the French, in this case, coming downriver? You've never seen anyone like them before. You would take note of their strange clothing, their boats, their weapons, their tools. The French, such as Père Jacques Marquette, who was a Jesuit missionary spreading the word of Catholicism throughout the New World, and French explorer Louis Joliet, would have taken note of the resources in the New World. They were mapping out waterways, trade routes from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf into the ocean. They would have taken note of the timber, the vastness of the woodlands, the oak, the hickory, the pine. They would have taken note of the prairies, the meadows, and the wildlife living there, the turkey, the deer, the elk, even bear and gray wolf at that time. They also would have noticed the vast sandstone cliffs across the river from the village, including the 125-foot sandstone butte standing sentinel over the grand village of the Kaskaskia. Now, if you were a member of this French exploration, this is during a time where the New World was being explored by the French, the British, and the Spanish. Everyone was trying to catch their piece of the pie, so to speak. If you were part of this party and you knew land was important, resources were important, what would you see as a potential on top of this 125-foot sandstone butte? A fort. This brings us from 1673, when Père Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet met the Kaskaskia, to just 10 years later, to 1683. For that, I need you to move a bit closer to the diorama shown here. Now, in 1683, you're no longer a member of the Kaskaskia village. Now I want you to picture yourself as a young French soldier. Your duty is to clear the woodland edge around the perimeter of that sandstone butte you now call Le Rocher, which is the rock in French, what we now call Starved Rock today. Your commander is Henry Tonty, another French explorer who is working underneath the guidance of Robert René Cavelier, also known as La Salle, to build a French fort on top of Le Rocher, the rock. A couple dozen French soldiers were responsible for putting in the palisade, the spiked wooden fence around the perimeter of the rock. This was 8 to 10 inches in diameter, 15 to 20 feet high. You'll also notice what look like wooden block houses. Those are redoubts. Those also served as lookouts for the fort. Inside the fort were several Indian huts, soldiers' cabins, a warehouse or gun magazine, and a chapel. Now, if you look on the outskirts of the rock, this area today would be where you're standing. This was soon to be called La Salle's Colony. Once the fort was constructed in 1683, Tonty was commissioned with the task to go out in search of those Native American tribes that had previously left the Starved Rock area because of constant attacks by Iroquois from the east. He was successful. Imagine yourself as that French soldier accompanying Tonty, talking to these various Native American tribes, convincing them to come back to the Starved Rock area. Tribes such as the Shawnee, Peoria, Miami came back to the area because of protection from the French fort. And La Salle was happy to welcome them because La Salle had a trade commission from the French government. Fort St. Louis soon became the center for French diplomacy and trade in what we know of as the Midwest today. Items that they would have traded. The Native Americans would have traded pelts. During this time, beaver pelts were in high demand in France. They're waterproof because of where they live, and their warmth. Does anyone need any more hand sanitizer? No. Okay, and we can pass this around as well. Where do we want to start? Okay. In return for the beaver pelts, the local tribes were in search of tools and weapons. Previously, they had been fashioning these out of animal bones, wood, and stone. The Europeans, specifically the French during this time, brought metal, such as this metal axe head that was found right here at Starved Rock during one of those excavations. Metal is more sustainable, doesn't chip or crack. You don't have to replace it as often as a stone axe head. Guns could aim and shoot at wildlife or enemies faster than a bow and arrow. So we have gun flints and musket balls that were found in the area. Think of cotton fabric, wool blankets, metal pots for cooking instead of stoneware or clay. We also find blue glass beads such as these that were specifically traded from the French to those tribes. These are all artifacts from the area. Fort St. Louis, or Fort St. Louis, Fort Saint Louis, if it's in French, served as a trading post from 1683 to 1691. By 1691, it had pretty much seen its heyday. Natural resources were starting to become depleted in the area. What happens when resources become depleted? Tribes move. Tribes look for resources elsewhere. So those same tribes that formed LaSalle's colony, beginning with the Illinois Confederation, started moving further south to what we know of as Peoria, Illinois today. The French, soon realizing their trade had moved further south, abandoned Fort St. Louis and moved further south as well. This brings us to our last journey in our time travels, to the year 1769. At this time, Fort St. Louis was gone from the top of Starved Rock. We do see an Illinois tribe living again in the grand village of the Kaskaskia across from Starved Rock. During this time, we have not only French influence in what we know of as Illinois today, but also British influence. This is only a few years before the American Revolution. Native American culture and way of life is intermingling with both the French and the British, not only through trade, also through marriage, through living in villages and cultural beliefs. Some had switched over to Christianity or Catholicism. Some Native American tribes worked well with the French and British. Others did not. One of those tribes were the Ottawa people. Chief Pontiac was leader of the Ottawa people, and he felt that Native American culture, way of life, their belief system, was falling to the wayside. They were becoming more and more reliant upon French and British trade goods, the guns, the metal projectile points for their bow and arrows, the metal pots, the cotton fabric, even items, agricultural items such as pigs and cows. He wanted to change that. So he called for a conference to be held in what we know of as present-day Joliet, Illinois. At this conference, he was to speak about the damaging ways of the Europeans on the Native American way of life as he saw it. He was stabbed to death during this conference, supposedly by a Peoria brave under the instruction of the British. When word got back to an allied tribe of the Ottawa called the Potawatomi, who lived just north of here, they sought retribution in the form of revenge on the closest Illinois village, which happened to be across from Starved Rock. They attacked the village. Those remaining fled across the shallow river and sought refuge on top of that 125-foot sandstone butte, thinking we can see them coming. We can protect ourselves from this high ground. What they didn't realize is that they could be surrounded. The Potawatomi surrounded them on all sides. Didn't let anyone down, didn't let any food up, didn't let any water up from the river. Imagine yourself now as an Illinois brave on top of the rock, watching your family and your friends suffer from dehydration and starvation, not knowing how to escape. You and a handful of other braves find a way out by hiding on a small rock shelf on the side of the rock at night and steal away in canoes down the river to the closest allied village where you tell your tale of suffering. But is it a tale? Is it truthful historical events that have been recorded? Or is it a Native American legend? That is up to you to decide. What I will mention is that no archaeological evidence has ever been found to support the Starved Rock legend of 2,000 Native Americans being starved on top of Starved Rock. Archaeologists have found 2 Native American burial sites, as well as evidence of Fort St. Louis. They have found evidence of various skirmishes and battles in the area, but nothing to support the Starved Rock legend. However, the legend has survived throughout the ages as a romanticized tale. So much so that the state of Illinois, in 1911, when it purchased this land we now know of as Starved Rock State Park for $150,000, they kept the name Starved Rock. Today, when you head out into the modern world, I want you to think each time you go grocery shopping, cook dinner to put on your table, go to the hardware store to buy supplies for a repair at home. I want you to think back 10,000 years, 5,000 years, 500 years of how the human inhabitants survived in this area off the natural resources. How different would your life be? I thank you for coming on the tour today. I hope you had a great time with us. I hope you get a chance to explore our trails. If you have any questions at this time, I'll be more than happy to answer.